Meeting of the Paulding County Airport Authority Citizen Steering Committee. Sorry we're a little bit late. We had a tour. We're going to jump right in and go to the agenda. There should be copies out there if you don't already have one. So we're calling the meeting to order, and then we have the invocation and a pledge. I'm not sure we have a flag, so I don't know if folks what we do if we don't have a flag.
You can say it anyway.
Okay. Do the okay.
That's okay. Father, once again we pause to just say thank you for the great weather we've been having and an opportunity to come out tonight. Father, we ask you to just give us clarity of mind and unity of heart as we look at this business. May we make decisions that'll be acceptable, that'll be pleasing, that'll be the right thing to do for Paulding County. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen.
It's in the circle down there.
Yeah.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is the approval of our last meeting, July 24th. We circulated the minutes. There were some comments that we need to talk about. John, did you have introduce what suggested change was?
Yeah, Larry had sent a recommendation on 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth bullet down. The bottom, it says the general consensus that the link between the Paulding County Airport Authority and IBA should be broken. The membership of the Paulding County Airport Authority should consist primarily of members with a strong aviation background. I finally found the video and went back and looked at it because there was some misunderstanding about how it was actually said, and the actual video said that it was the link between the Paulding County Airport Authority and the IBA should be broken, and the membership should be independent between the two committees. Is what it was. But there again, it was not a vote by the committee, it was a general consensus. It was basically an opinion that we had. So I need to change the words on the very last paragraph.
So is this going to read, and the membership should be independent
Of the IBA, of each other.
And then there was just the one other small one,
I got
context of
I got
that
the
versus
typo change,
answer.
yeah.
Okay.
There was one other change back at the back on the very last sentence. It says Airport Authority 5-year plan. I forget what it said. A to arrange it. It says and to arrange for Calvin Thomas. It's supposed to be an and.
So if those changes will be reflected, is there a motion to?
Before we vote, I just want to make a clarification. It's not in the minutes. We had a discussion about Class 3, the requirements of Part 139, Class 3 airport. And while that discussion, I think, was accurate, we found out after the meeting that Paulding County Airport Authority has in fact requested a Class 1 certificate. The significant difference being that there is not the 30-passenger limit for a Class 1 airport. Other than that, I think the discussion we had was accurate.
Should that be added or?
No, I just wanted to make sure that we were all clear.
And by the way, I'll pass these minutes back out again after I get that wording changed in there. And I barely made it to the meeting, so watching the video.
Do they ultimately get posted?
Yeah, they get posted to the
And change the date
The
here
date,
from
yeah.
12 June to
Oops.
24 July.
What happened when you couldn't paste?
With the noted changes, make a move to receive.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next up, all of us were able to, just about everybody was able to fit in the car, and Blake gave us a nice tour down that way and down this way. I thought that was really helpful. And with that, Blake was going to talk about the 5-year plan. So, how long do you think, how much have you budgeted, kind of go through that? If you weren't interrupted or didn't have a question.
Go through it in a general level of detail, about 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
If you want to get into questions on each specific project, it's going to stretch out a lot longer than that, but I'm at your
So if
disposal.
everybody could, kind of keep notes on questions and try and let Blake go all the way through if possible, but, you know, if you do want to stop them, that's fine too. But try and hold it to the end, that way we can get through it.
If I'm totally confusing you, then stop me so that I can answer it. I've got these drawings I'm going to refer to. I've got 2 copies of them that I wanted to just leave here for y'all to reference, in case you can't see these real well. I'm going to go through the 5-year airport capital improvement plan, which I've made copies and given to each one of you. It's the exact same thing that I emailed John to you, and I don't know if you emailed it out to the rest of the board or not. So
I'll be honest, I don't even have to give it, but I'll double check.
okay. Okay. Well, I have all this information in electronic format. So I've got the 5-year plan. I've got these exhibits. All of it's in electronic format. So if you want it in electronic format, just let me know, and I can get it to you, no problem at all. I'm going to start off just briefly telling you what a 5-year capital improvement program is, why we do it, and that type of thing. The Federal Aviation Administration requires that any airport that wants federal funding keep a 5-year plan for capital improvement projects. Capital improvement projects are, for the most part, just about anything we do in the airport that involves moving dirt or building buildings or utilities or anything else for that matter. So it's a pretty comprehensive plan. They do require that it's updated every year. So every December, I submit a new capital improvement plan to the FAA, to Georgia DOT. This is the exact same presentation and material that I shared with the Airport Authority in January. So as soon as we submit it to the FAA and the state, I give a presentation to the Airport Authority. And this is the same material that they saw back in January. It will be updated between now and December and resubmitted to the FAA and Georgia DOT. And it does change every single year because projects shift up and back, priorities shift, so it's just a nature of the beast that every year these things do slide around. A project is not eligible for federal funding unless it's in the 5-year plan. So there are some things in here that there is a likelihood we won't do. But in the event that we were able to do it, it's in here because otherwise we wouldn't be able to get federal funding, and I'll touch on some of those as we go through it. What you have actually starts with FY14. My chart starts at FY15 because we always have the previous year on here just for reference purposes. So FY14 is done, finished, gone. That ended at the end of June. So that time frame is past us, and we're already into FY15. But at the time this was put together, we were in the middle of FY14, so it's on here for reference purposes. You'll see in FY14 we have the environmental assessment for the airport projects. That's the environmental assessment that was driven by the legal challenge to FAA. That environmental assessment still has not started, so even though we had it shown in FY14, it is actually, in reality, going to be an FY15 project because it hasn't even started yet. We do have on there the 600-foot runway 31 safety area overrun project, which is where we went a little while ago, and I showed you that project. That was an FY14 project, and even though we're still kind of piddling around with it a little bit, it was funded in FY14, so it remains an FY14 project. And then we have the construction of the corporate hangar, which you saw as well. It's the hangar that's just at the end of the traffic circle over here, and that is an IBA project that's funded by the IBA. So before I go any further, let me describe the headings at the top of the spreadsheet. I probably should have done that before I started talking about the projects. You basically have, after the physical year, you have a project number and a project description, which is just a very, very short narrative description of what the project is. And then your source is whether it's going to be a federally funded project or not. And that's basically There are some state-funded projects, but they're very, very, very few and far between. I don't even think we have any state-funded projects in this 5-year. No, we got one, the approach lights, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But pretty much everything else is federally funded or other, which means if it's other, it could be another government agency, like for example, it could be Department of Economic Development. It could be a grant through Appalachian Regional Commission or some other entity like that. I'll talk about that in a minute because we do have a project that's funded through the Appalachian Regional Commission. Or it could be private funded, and private funding could be a developer who comes in here and builds T-hangers, like Morgan McNeil, who built the T-hangers that are on the other side of the IBA's hangar, or it could be some other entity like Silver County.
Could be also bonds.
Some
bonds.
Yeah, it could be bonds. Bonds.
I know the IBA is doing that, but
Yeah.
such as the new thing.
Yeah, it could be bonds, but we typically try to tie it back to what's the ultimate funding going to be. So for example, when we talk about the taxiway widening in here, even though it's short-term it's funded by bonds, long-term it's funded by FAA. So it's going to show up in here as FAA funded because that's where the end game is with the FAA funding. You'll see that the state does throw in, on most federal projects, they do throw in a match. It's usually 5%. Sometimes it goes to 2.5%. Sometimes it goes to 7.5%, but typically it's 5%. And the local match that's required is typically 5% as well. Sometimes that'll fluctuate a little bit, but most of the time it is 5%. Okay, dropping back to FY15, which is the exhibit that you have here. We have what we've shown on here are the projects that are basically either going to be designed or constructed in FY15, but what you have on these spreadsheets, you have a whole lot more information because there are a lot of reimbursements that we're seeking from the FAA for things that we've already done. So these first 3 items that you have on here, you have reimbursement for the terminal area environmental permitting. That is this area that we looked at to the east of the terminal building here, where we expect to do future developments on the airport. For some reason, we called that the terminal area apron expansion. Not a great title for that. I wish we'd picked something else to call it because now it's a little bit confusing. But that reimbursement is for the design of the construction of that area and the environmental permitting for that area. You have the reimbursement for the localizer platform. That's the big, tall platform that we looked at down off the west end down here that has the localizer tower on it. We've been kind of putting off the reimbursement on that localizer for a while. Typically, FAA will come to us each fiscal year with some money, and many times they will tell us where that money is going to be spent if there's a safety project that needs to be done. At other times, they will say, we've got some money here, you've got some things that are eligible for reimbursement, or you've got some other projects programmed in here you want to do. It's either or. You're not going to get both. What would you like to do? So at that point, we get a choice as to whether or not we want to get some money back that we've already spent, or whether we want to move forward a project that we're trying to get done. So that localizer platform has been put off since 2009 when it was done. We've put off reimbursement on it in order to get other things done. But that money ultimately will come back to us. Then you have Project 6 here. You've got reimbursement for mitigation credits for the terminal area expansion. Again, that's this big hole over here that we're going to be filling in with the dirt from behind the building. It's this area here. We're going to have to pipe about 2,000 feet of stream. So we had to purchase environmental mitigation credits in order to be able to do that. There's also a little bit of wetlands, I think about an acre or so, that we're going to have to fill in, and we have to purchase mitigation credits for that as well. That's already been done, so we're seeking reimbursement from the FAA for those items. Also, you'll see 7 says reimbursement for wildlife perimeter fencing. That perimeter fencing hasn't been done yet, so that likely will not be a reimbursement. It'll just be a regular project that will be paid for by the FAA as we go, as opposed to being a reimbursement. When this was put together in October, November of last year, we thought we were going to be able to move that wildlife fencing project forward a little bit quicker than what it has. So it would likely be a straight funding. Number 8 is construct terminal area expansion module 1. This is the grading and drainage portion of it. So again, this is module 1 right here. And as I told you when we were out there riding around, we've broken this up into 3 modules because it is a huge project, and because really we can't justify building the entire thing at one time. And we also most likely will not be able to get funding from the FAA to build the whole thing at one time. So we've broken it up into pieces that we hopefully will be able to get funded, and we'll build this thing in increments. So you've got module 1 is here, module 2 is right next to it, and module 3 is at the very end. And as I mentioned to you when we were out there, because of the way the topography falls off and the hole gets deeper and deeper and deeper, module 1 is the least expensive to build, module 2 is a little more expensive, and module 3 is even more expensive. So it will take a while to get there, but ultimately that's what we would like to do. And again, the dirt from this hill that's behind us is what goes in that hole in order to level that out and make it buildable. 9, you have construct terminal area expansion module 1, the paving and the marking. So once you fill it in and bring it up to grade with the drainage structures, then you got to pave it and you got to mark it in order to be able to use it. So that's just that's the next piece of the puzzle. But you'll note that it says design only. So what we tend to try to do is we tend to try to design in 1 year and build in the next year, because it's virtually impossible within 1 physical year to get something designed, get it approved by all the different agencies that have to approve it, and get it built within the same year. So typical model we use is design in 1 year, construct in the next. So as we're moving all the dirt and putting in the drainage structures, we're designing the pavement and the marking at the same time. And then in the following year, you'll see the paving and marking in the budget the following year. And the last thing in FY10 is construct corporate executive hangars. That is a project that we anticipate will be done potentially by Silver Comet in their efforts to bring some other businesses to the airport. We've got probably 3 locations, actually right here where it says number 3. You've got 2 locations there and a location on the other side of the ramp where you could build additional hangars today. Those sites are already on grade, utilities are already there, the apron's already there, so it's ready for construction. So we would anticipate at some point in time in FY15 for a second large hangar like the one that we're building now to go into that area. That is what FY15 looks like, and again, FY15 is July 1 of this year through June 30th of next year, so that's the fiscal calendar that we're on. Any questions on FY15?
I just have one real quick question.
Mhm.
For reimbursements, why do they show up as positive amounts and not negative amounts?
This goes to the FAA, so this is funding requests.
So they know how much money to budget?
Exactly,
Gotcha.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not our, it's not budgeted internally for us, it's budgeted for FAA.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's prepared specifically for them.
Okay.
FY16, I'm going to try to run through these a little quicker since they're another year out. You've got reimbursement for water quality monitoring. When we built the airport, part of the mandate for the environmental clearance was that we do 10 years worth of water quality monitoring in all of the streams all the way around the airport. So we've got multiple different locations, I think there are 4, where we do water quality monitoring. And we also do fish surveys multiple times a year as well. All that information is submitted to the Corps of Engineers and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and in a nutshell, it provides a means for them to go back and look over an extended period of time what the streams look like before construction, during construction, and after construction, so they can kind of learn, I guess. It's almost like a little mini research project, in my opinion, but it allows them to take a look at that life cycle. Next is construct terminal area expansion, paving, and marking. As I mentioned a while ago, we designed that in FY15, and then construct it in FY16. So that is module 1, and there in blue is the area that we anticipate constructing the pavement and the marking. Number 13 is reimbursement for the partial parallel taxiway extension and widening. That's the project that's already been done, at least the widening portion of it that we looked at as we were driving from one end of the airport to the other. So we will be seeking the reimbursement from FAA on that project. 15 is construct runway 31 safety area extension to 1,000 feet. We talked about that when we were out there. We went to the minimum, which was 600-foot safety overrun on the 31 end, but we need to ultimately get to the standard, which is 1,000 feet. So that is the goal. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll take the dirt off the sides of these two hills over here, which are kind of encroaching on the safety areas for the runway. We'll take the dirt from those two areas and fill it in off the end down there to get us to our 1,000-foot safety overrun. Now, in here on 14, you'll see at the end of it, it says design. So again, it's the same thing that I mentioned a while ago. We'll design it in FY16, construct it in FY17. You've also got terminal area expansion module 2, grading and draining. Again, that's design only. So as we are constructing this ramp and marking it, we're designing this next phase, and then in the following year we'll look to do the grading and drainage on that. So each one of these, it's just like Lego blocks. You just kind of put one on top of the other. You just kind of keep going in that method. In 16 or project 16, you got wildlife hazard assessment. We already have issues with wildlife. We have deer on the airport. We have coyote on the airport. We have turkey on the airport. We have multiple different critters running around out there. If you get out on the runway and taxiway in the mornings and look around, you find lots of fresh critter poop out on the runway and taxiway. So we've got critters out there. We do need to get the wildlife fencing in place in order to control that. Once the wildlife fencing is in place, then you will come back and do another wildlife hazard assessment after the fencing is in place to determine if the problem is solved. If the problem is not solved, then what do you need to do beyond wildlife fencing in order to control any other animal wildlife issues that you have on the airfield. The last two items in FY16 are construct airport entrance road extension. That is the extension of the airport parkway. So today the airport parkway comes down, stops, and you have to make a right turn in order to get into the airport. It is intended to be extended pretty much the entire length of the airport. And that is a project that is funded, as you'll see, by other in this case is Appalachian Regional Commission. We have an Appalachian Regional Commission grant in order to construct that road. That project is not even being managed by the airport. That project is being managed by the county. They're managed by the Department of Transportation in the county. Those dollars come from Appalachian Regional Commission through the Federal Highway Administration, through Georgia DOT, through the county DOT. So there's a lot of bureaucracy associated with that. But nonetheless, that's how that project is intended to be funded and constructed and managed. But we show it in our 5-year capital improvement plan because it's significant. It's part of the infrastructure that supports the growth and development of the airport. If we didn't show the road, but we were showing these modules being built down through here, then the obvious question will be, well, how in the world do you get to them if there's no road there? There's no point in building this stuff if you can't get to it. So you have to design and marry up these projects, even when they're funded through different agencies and managed by different folks. And then you have, again, more hangars. At project priority 18 is more hangars. You'll see each year that we have hangar construction in the capital improvement plan each year. It's a best guess. We anticipate that we've got 3 existing pads that can be built on, and through matriculation, we would hope that we would build 1 a year. We could build 3 a year, or we could build none a year. So it is an educated guess. Any questions on FY16 before we move on?
I'd like to ask a question, Blake, if it's okay, on the construction runway 31 safety area.
Yes.
If you're going after the 139, and we're gonna, when we get done with this project right here, we're gonna have 600 feet.
Yes, sir.
Complete, correct?
Yes, sir.
Why do you need the 1,000 if they would give it to you at
Yeah, we talked about that in detail and went out and looked at it, but 600 feet, FAA has two different standards for almost everything. They have a minimum and they have a standard. So the minimum is 600 feet, the standard is 1,000. So when I go to FAA and start giving them project lists of projects that we want to do at the airport, their priorities might not be exactly the same as mine. Their priority is always going to be safety. Safety is always going to come first. And they're going to want to see that runway safety area out to 1,000 feet before they fund much of anything else. So they're going to hold our feet to the fire, so to speak, on getting that runway safety area out to 1,000 feet. I mean, I could put it out in year 5, but that's not the way it's going to work. They're going to require us to do it earlier on in the program.
So they're willing to still give the 139 with only the 600 feet?
Yeah, that's the minimum. Yep.
With you, okay. And so is that, when that's designed out there, you and I have been out there before, when that's designed and it's done, would that ever be something that you could extend the runway from there and then extend another 1,000?
Yeah, we talked about that as well when we were out there, and I'll see if I've got a drawing that might show this a little better. Yeah, here we go, this shows it real well. What you see here in red is the 600 feet.
Right.
And if you can see that little black line right there, that little black line is the 1,000 feet. And if you look past that little black line, what you see is a whole bunch of little contour lines that are really, really tight together, and then it flattens out, and then you got a blue line. So what you have out there is you have it's not flat, I don't want to give that impression, but you have more of a gentle fall out to about 1,000 feet, and then it starts diving down to a big stinking hole down there, and in that hole is a creek, and that's what this blue line is a creek. So the feasibility of being able to construct even another 100 feet or 200 feet, it's going to get exponentially more expensive with each additional foot that you go. So once we get to 1,000 feet, the total slope here is going to be out into this bank already. And to try to go any further than that is going to get really, really expensive really, really fast. It's not impossible, but it's
Just all about moving dirt.
well, it's not all about moving dirt because you're going to get into this creek and you're going to get into the buffer. This is a protected stream because it's a secondary trout stream. So it's got a 50-foot buffer on it, and actually 75 if you include the county's buffer. So the buffer on this creek comes way over here. So it's not just about moving dirt. It's about you'd have to do a completely new EA because crossing that creek or getting into that creek is going to be a different ballgame than what we've got planned. And then the expense of it is going to be pretty astronomical. So it's not impossible, but it's probably not practical at all.
And what's the actual elevation drop from say the 1,000-foot edge drop?
From 1,000 foot, it drops 10, 20, 30, 40 feet. Yeah, maybe even more.
So that's pretty significant.
Yeah, it drops a lot. And it not only drops in this direction, it drops to the north as well, so which means that you're going to be chasing it 2 directions. You're going to be chasing it to the west and you're going to be chasing it to the north. So it gets really ugly really fast.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Where you got design parking and new hangars going, it's the same creek that
Yes.
would be affected by the overrun area?
Yes, it is.
And you've got permits on this creek here?
We did.
Did you think about getting permits down here?
No, because it costs us $1 million, well, $1.2 million just to get that.
To mitigation,
Yeah.
right. But it's still the same.
It's not impossible.
Right.
It
It's
can
still
be
the same
done.
creek, right.
But it's
And we've.
2-year process to get the environmental, and then another several $1 million for the environmental mitigation, and then the cost of constructing, which again gets really, really expensive.
But it's the same creek.
Yeah.
I just can't believe that you can buy your environment, and that's what it sounds like, these environmental.
Buy the mitigation
Buy mitigation.
credits.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, that's what it is. I mean, you have 2 choices with environmental mitigation. You can buy and protect, or you can create, or you can buy credits. But unless you are an entity that's in the business of doing that, no one tries to create the mitigation because That, it takes a full-time entity that's all that they do in order to do that.
That's why the credits are so expensive.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is the runway safety area. You remember when we looked at the runway safety area off the west end over here, the runway safety area is graded at a 5% slope all the way down. The runway is not. The runway is flat. So the other part of, if you tried to extend the runway, is this area right here is not on grade for runway. It's on grade for runway safety area, which means all of that's got to come up to runway grade, and then you start safety overrun from there. So for every foot you do, it's not like you add a foot of runway, you add a foot of safety area. You add a foot of runway, you probably add 10 feet of safety area by the time you bring everything up and push it out.
That's
So
all been filled in out there anyway.
it has been.
I mean,
It has been. Yep. Any other questions on 2016? All right, 2017. Again, you got reimbursement for water quality, which again is the 10-year monitoring that we've done as part of our original environmental clearance. Construct 3-1 safety area extension to 1,000 feet. So that's what we talked about a while ago, is we designed it in the previous year and then we constructed it in this year out to 1,000 feet. Then you've got, you're going back to the terminal area expansion module 2, grading and drainage, which is here. Construct terminal area expansion module 2, the paving and marking, design only, so same philosophy as we're filling in dirt and drainage structures, we're designing the next portion of it, which is the paving and the grading. Then you've got approach lighting system. Again, this is design only. This is not the installation. The installation will be in the following year, and more hangers as well. So any questions on 2017? You can see that these things get more generic as we go out a little bit further, because the further out you forecast, the less definitive it is. Yes.
Just for my education more than anything, why exactly is the approach lighting in 2017, or the design of it in 2017, but not necessarily, say, in 2016?
We're making a guesstimate as to when an approach lighting system might be needed. We don't need an approach lighting system today. We know we're not going to need it next year. We're making a projection. It's going to be based on traffic. So depending on how many commercial flights, how many corporate jets, how many nighttime operations, those types of things are going to dictate when the lighting system may be needed. That's one of those items that I talked about earlier, that we kind of stick some stuff in here thinking we may need it, but when we redo this in November, October, November, I can tell you this is going to get pushed out another year, because right now we're no closer to needing it today than we were this time last year, so it's going to get pushed out another year. And that may happen year after year after year for 5 or 6 years. But again, if it's not in here, then it's not eligible for funding. So there's some things that are kept because of the potential that they could be needed. So
Keeping that in mind, the farther you go out, obviously it becomes a little bit harder to know if that's really going
Yeah.
to happen or not. So
Absolutely.
with that, maybe we can kind of wrap it up, see if anybody has any questions on any other items for the remainder of the 5-year plan.
Do you know what your funding for 2015 is from FAA? When do you, how does that work?
generally, they will come out with some funding, usually end August, 1st of September. But that's not always the case, because it depends on how the funds are appropriated by Congress. So I'm probably going into way more detail than you need. But for about 6 years, Congress didn't have a funding bill for the FAA. They kept doing these continuing resolutions. They did a 2-month continuing resolution, or a 6-month, or a 4-month, or a 3-month, or whatever. So they kept doing these little continuing resolutions. So for a number of years, all the projects were being funded in little bitty tiny increments, because FAA was only getting their money 2, 3, 4, 5 months at a time, instead of getting 12 months of funding where they could allocate all of their projects for the year. It wasn't coming that way. So now they're in a little better shape than what they were, because they do have a funding bill. However, Congress still continues to screw around with the annual budgets. We've been going several years without an approved annual budget. So when that happens and you have things like sequestration, it really monkeys with the FAA's ability to fund projects. So while I'm saying typically we would see funding in August or September, the last few years, that's been pushed forward to like January, February. So instead of funding in the first quarter or the first half of the fiscal year, they were funding in the third quarter or the last half of the fiscal year. So I have not had a specific conversation with FAA lately to talk about when funding is going to be available for FY15. One thing I can tell you, there are a few things I can tell you with 100% certainty, not a whole lot, but a few. One thing I can tell you with 100% certainty is we're not going to get everything we've asked for in FY15. If we get half of what we asked for, I'll be ecstatic. So some years we get more, some years we get less. We try to be in a position to be able to capture what is typically called fallout money. At the end of a fiscal year, occasionally a project will fall through that was supposed to be built in that fiscal year, and for environmental or right-of-way or land acquisition or for whatever reason, that project doesn't happen. And FAA has to reallocate that money, and they typically have to do it very, very quickly before the end of the fiscal year. So we try to have projects in here that are designed and are ready to go, or reimbursements in here that we can turn around really, really quickly and take that money. And we have been very, very, very successful over the last 10 years in getting fallout money, because we always have projects that are ready to go, and we typically have reimbursements that are ready to go. So we will, much of the time, we'll get our project funded, and then at the end of the fiscal year, a lot of times we'll capture a little more money on some other project because of that. So and it's just part of the way the federal government works. It's not very pretty, but it's the way it works.
I know our funding at Lockheed would come out, we'd get notification in September, we'd get final notification in October, and we didn't get funds usually until January, February. So.
Right.
And we had to operate off our own money. So.
Right. And unfortunately, I think the problems with the Federal Highways Trust Fund is probably going to contaminate the FAA. The FAA has their own funding sources through aviation gas tax and through ticket fees. When you buy a ticket on an airline, you pay fees, taxes that go into the federal government, and they go to the Aviation Trust Fund for aviation projects. But FAA is under Federal Highway Administration. Federal Highway Administration is scheduled to go bankrupt in the near future if Congress doesn't do something. So I'm concerned that the FAA's funding is going to get locked down as part of this whole political mess on trying to renegotiate and reconstruct the Federal Highway Administration's Federal Highway Trust Fund. But that's just me giving you my crystal ball, which is not worth anything, really.
So when you go into doing your 5-year study or your 5-year plan for the first, say, 2-3 years, do they actually, does the FAA give you guidance saying project for year 1, 2, and 3, project potentially getting X, Y, Z in funding, or is that just your, based off of what you all, based off of historical data as to what you all have collected in the past, this is what we anticipate doing for the next?
It's based completely off historical data. FAA will not guarantee you a single penny. The only thing I'm guaranteed, as a general aviation airport, I have what's called entitlements. I'm entitled to $150,000 a year from the FAA for maintenance and capital improvement. That is the only thing that is guaranteed, is the $150,000 a year. Anything beyond that is it's based on the FAA funding the FAA gets and how competitive your projects are, because my projects are competing against the projects at PDK and the ones at Cobb County and the ones down in Savannah and every other project, not just in the state of Georgia, but in the entire southeastern region. So my projects are going to be looked at by FAA under a broader spectrum of, okay, we got a runway safety area here that's 600, needs to go to 1,000. We got one over at Winder that's 200, that needs to go to 500. I mean, it's going to get looked at along with a big, huge bucket of projects. And of course, like every other agency, they can't afford to do all the projects. And they're going to look at safety first. They're going to look at whose project's ready to go. They're going to look at who has managed their projects well in the past, because they don't want to go put money back in an airport where they where they mismanage projects and mismanage funds, because that's been a problem that, specifically some smaller airports where they don't have professional staff. And I'm not saying it's just the situation, they just don't have professional staff, and it's hard for them to manage projects.
Blake, so this is the 5-year plan for
It is.
the airport and
Yep.
Byron or whatever. How do you interrelate or with the Paulding County as far as transportation, getting roads and managing the areas of people and other things trying to get to the airport? How much interface do you have with that? I guess that's more of a comprehensive plan for the whole county.
It's a comprehensive transportation plan that the county does, and I'm fortunate because I have a DOT background, so I ran the Department of Transportation for Paulding County for 6 years. I hired Scott Green, who runs the DOT now. So I have a very good connection there, and whenever they have a transportation plan update, I'm always involved and I always give them my input, and they like it, they want my input, and they ask for it.
If we have the transportation plan, you can see different airport-related things that might connect to what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. Now, they only do a comprehensive transportation plan update probably every 10 years. They don't do them real often. So, you know, what we're doing changes a lot in a period of 10 years. So, you know, 10 years ago, we were still trying to get the design finished for the airport. We hadn't even started land acquisition yet. So, as you can see, a whole lot of things change in 10 years from our perspective versus county's transportation plan, which, you know, a few things have changed, but not a ton.
I just wanted to bring that up to the extent the committee wants to look at how does the overall transportation, you know, the Silver Comet takes off, what's gonna happen to all these roads around here, people coming in here? What's the planning for that?
Yeah. Now, two things that I can tell you. One is that the parkway coming in, they bought right away for 4-lane, and they designed it for 4-lane. So when you drive out of here, you'll notice there's big old stinking wide shoulders on this parkway in both directions because it was designed for a 4-lane. So that has been pre-planned. Highway 278 being limited access, divided 4-lane up there is at probably maybe 15 to 20% of its capacity. So that road, you know, there's only about 15,000 cars a day on that section, whereas you go, you know, back towards the other side of Hiram, you got 40,000 cars a day on it. So there's a lot more capacity out in this section.
So with that being said, for instance, would they actually, since it is limited access out on 278, would the state have the right to actually go out and put a traffic light there to do traffic control, or would it always remain an open intersection?
Then the state's always going to have the last say so because it's Georgia DOT controls them.
Sure.
It's their road, so they're always going to have the last say so on it. You know, the fact is that 95% of our traffic all comes from Dallas and goes back to Dallas, so it's all left in and right out. So a traffic light really doesn't help you a whole lot in this particular situation. Unless folks are trying to make a left out on 278, that's when you need a traffic light. But I don't see a traffic light being there anytime in the foreseeable future.
But it could happen because we put several traffic lights up 278 just in the last few years. You got one at Old Harris Road went up, you got one at the hospital emergency room entrance. I mean, they're state done, state approved, but we still participate in that, so
Right.
it can still be done if it
Oh,
was
it can be
needed.
done if it needs to be
Right.
done, sure, absolutely,
Right.
yeah.
I had just one quick question. I know Mike's really trying to hurry and you're doing a great job. I just got looking up, could you put up FY 2019?
Yep.
And just tell me about number 3.
Yeah, number 3 is 500-foot runway extension on the 13M. That is one of those projects that's thrown in there in the event that, you know, DeSoto, who we tried to attract to come to the airport in 2009, and then again in 2011. We had, for 2012 that is, so in 2009 and 2012, we tried to attract DeSoto in here to build a manufacturing facility. They would have needed the additional 500 feet. We would have had to have gone to the state to fund it as an economic development project because they were going to bring 1,500 jobs. So it's one of those projects that's in there as just a placeholder. I have absolutely no expectation whatsoever that that's going to be built unless we land a major aircraft manufacturer. If we land a major aircraft manufacturer, it can get built. Otherwise, I don't see it happening.
So what would precipitate a large manufacturer coming in, having to have that additional 500 feet on the west side of the runway as opposed to being able to use the existing runway with the current design that's in
The 6,000 feet versus 6,500 feet?
it? Right.
There are different requirements on test flights than there are on regular flights. So if, Dassault builds the Falcon can land on 5,500 feet. We've had multiple Falcons land here on 5,500 feet. So it wasn't a matter of having to have it for the design capability of the aircraft. It was the fact that they were going to be doing test flights. They were going to be manufacturing airplanes, bringing them off the line, and then doing a first flight. So they needed to have additional runway as a safety factor because of that. So that was what precipitated that requirement. It wasn't based on the characteristics of the airplane.
One thing I know that you and I have talked about in the past is that once the Part 139 certification is granted, this airport would then receive $1 million in entitlement per fiscal year.
Yeah, the entitlement would change from 150,000 a year to $1 million a year.
Right.
Yes.
So can you use, hypothetically, let's say the FAA chooses not to fund 2 projects, can you use that $1 million entitlement to actually continue on with a projected construction plan, or would the FAA halt it because they weren't ultimately given the funding for that project?
The FAA still has to sign off on the project. If it's going to be federally funded, the FAA has to sign off on it. Now, the FAA may tell me that their priority is, for example, and this is totally hypothetical, this is not the case, but they may say their priority is getting the runway safety area at 1,000 feet. And I may say, oh, no, my priority is getting the extra, the last 500 feet on the taxiway out here. FAA is still always going to trump me. It's their money. So at the end of the day, they're going to I'll say so. But the $1 million entitlement is a benchmark. They're going to designate $1 million for our airport for that year versus the benchmark of 150,000. So that, at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's a minimum threshold for what you're going to get. But they're still going to control the strings.
And so that, but you could apply that $1 million to, say, reimbursements if you so needed at that time.
Yeah, again, the FAA typically, a lot of times they'll give us an option. They'll say, the project that you've got over here, we've got $500,000, we can do that project, or do you want your money back on your platform out here? And that was part of the reason that we didn't get reimbursed on the land acquisition until 2012, 2013, is because we had other construction projects that we wanted to keep moving forward. So we could have gotten reimbursed on our land acquisition in 2011 or 2010 possibly, but we kept moving projects forward instead of taking the money back. Now, you can't do that forever because you need your funds back to do other things with. So, it's a balancing act.
Thanks a lot, Blake. Appreciate the update. If we have questions later, I'm sure we can get back to you.
Easy to
Thanks.
find.
Can you send all that to us electronically?
Yeah, go ahead.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Well, that you can actually find online. That's actually through the
Some of
website.
this is a little different.
And by the way, I'm keeping track of all the things that are basically submitted, so thinking down the line, we have to wrap up. I want to have kind of a bibliography of all the sources that were presented to the committee, so that's great for us to get a copy of that, so I don't have to go out and find it. With that, moving right along, citizen input. Larry, Mark, I got the basket here. I got one input, very nicely worded letter. Looks like it tends to be in favor of what's been going on, so we'll scan that in and you'll email it to everybody, and I can put it in our
And
file.
we have not received any emails.
No emails?
No.
Okay.
So,
So we've got one. We've got one citizen viewpoint. So I want to challenge the citizens to get some viewpoints in here.
We did. We gave you, I think, 10
We
right
got
off the
that one
bat.
sheet, right.
The one sheet.
But to the extent anybody wants to write a one-page letter, that's always good, because that'll be part of our work papers, as opposed to, if we have audio input or verbal input, that's kind of hard to transcribe. We're not going to be able to transcribe all that, so.
Okay.
So that's the citizen input status report. discussion and finalization of the committee's charter. Obviously, it's tough to get a committee going during the summer, and we did really good, but we're gonna have to kind of pick up the pace. Our goal was to have our report done in October. And, you know, it's kind of like developing a strategic plan. It's something we've kind of been going around and getting a lot of information, but it's time to really focus on what is our charter going to be, what are we here to do and accomplish, so that at the end of the day, we know what our report is going to say. So as John and I have been keeping track of minutes and all the documents, at the end of the day, we're going to start putting together the framework of what our ultimate report is going to be, and we'll start talking about that. But I think we've had plenty of time to figure out what the charter is, so I actually brought a couple pieces of paper and pens here as far as some overall objectives. John, I don't know if you would mind being described.
You'll have to keep it warm, because if you're it's cold, you won't read it.
But, you know, going back, this whole, as I see it, the steering committee was formed to give a citizen viewpoint, provide additional input from citizens. So the first thing was recommend changes to the local legislation that created the airport authority. We've had a fair amount of discussions on that, so I think everybody agrees that's one thing we got to do. Now we just got to get into details. And these are off what I think Mr. Carmichael sent. It's something that we haven't definitely agreed upon, but recommend changes to the current operations that provide the citizens of Paulding County a greater return on their investment of tax dollars. That's a pretty big one to get involved in. I'm not really sure where we want that to be within our scope. Any comment on that one?
The only thing that I saw on that, I went back through those today and looked at those, is I think we need to add something about accountability. Not necessarily to say how to do it, but we need to add some type of recommendation that they add the management programs or accountability to the citizens of what they're doing, so they can get their rate of return.
So right now what we have is every year the county has a budget. There's a certain amount of money that's allocated to the airport with the expectation that there's going to be some return, either increased tax base, jobs that are going to create tax dollars. I mean, I guess that's kind of in your purview as far as, I guess as a commissioner, you're seeing money invested in the airport. I expect that the overall objective is to either bring jobs or economic development that will lend to overall net benefit to the county.
Well, right now, the budget that's for the airport that's been put out there basically is the basic things just to run, pay staff, pay the director, secretary, the basic things of the airport. As far as in that budget type thing, there's not too many things. There's really not anything in the budget. Am I wrong, Blake? You back there with me? Really not anything in the budget as far as to do any type of projects or create anything.
I looked at the line item for airport, it's like 0.5% of the overall county budget, but there could be other line items there that have airport implications. That maybe what you're talking about is more transparency to figure out how much county dollars.
I was actually looking at what recommendations could we come up with, or brainstorm ideas could we come up with as a committee to add more accountability where the citizens seem like they get more money or more bang for the buck on these projects. And I've talked to several committee members, and I'm not, maybe it would be outside our scope, but not limited to just the airport, but all the projects that we don't have a management budget. Because we are the airport authority, I think we should focus on that.
I mean, I would like to see more so of, you know, when larger projects are coming about, maybe we need to set a financial threshold as to what that constitutes. At that point, it's opened up to a 45 day time period where it's set out as a notice to the general public, and everybody has the ability to make their viewpoints made at that point. That way, you know, it's not one of these deals where people feel like they haven't had a choice or haven't had a say, but at least that opportunity's been given to everybody.
But as Blake pointed out, let's say the citizens of the county said, well, we don't want that 500-foot extension, but the FAA, using 90% of the funding to pay for it, says that's what the money's going to be used for. Our only option would be to not accept the funding. We can't redirect that funding to some other project
No,
at our
I
discretion.
agree with that, but at the same time, if you've already got your 5-year plan, you kind of know what you're going with.
But the 5-year plan is public. I guess what I'm asking for is, what are you looking for in this accountability? What would you change from what we're doing right now?
Me personally, I'm not looking for any accountability.
Well,
It's
what we're
just
doing
more
right
of a
now is we
kind
have
of-
projects that are
well,
proposed, we
right.
have funding that's provided by the FAA that's matched at either a 5% or 10% level, and we get an opportunity to say either, yes, we'll accept that funding, or no, we won't, correct?
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to that is actually, our projects, if they're FAA funded, can't go over budget, they won't pay anymore. So, you know, they're very strict on the accountability. If it's going to go over, I have to take it to them with written documentation and justification as to why it's gonna go over, and they have to pre-approve it.
But I think
can't
what
go
you're
over
looking
without
for is
those.
accountability on the projects that we take on, correct?
I was thinking more along the lines personally from more of accountability all the way through the whole process, where you know that you're gonna overrun 6 months before you get there, before you have to go back to the FAA at the last minute. I'm talking about basic management techniques.
So why don't we just leave that as a concept, right? In other words, from a corporate environment, project management, you know, where we have a quasi-public-private partnership, I guess what you're looking for is more project
Whether
planning.
you're managing an FAA project or whether you're managing a Seven Hills Road project, we need to have more basic management techniques applied to our projects. And I hate to keep going over this, but I went to 6 months worth of chamber, building, what do you call it, board of directors. What are you on, Todd? Chamber. Board of Commissioners, their meeting. Every meeting, they had an overrun of some project. Seven Hills project, they didn't have enough streetlights. I mean, I can count telephone poles. We just need more planning in all of our projects, and whether it's an FAA-funded project or whether it's an IBA project. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
So you're talking about projects that are ongoing, not the decision of whether or not to take on a project?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, project management, so.
And you may, just on top of that, you may have another thing that John kind of mentioned, that maybe was alluded to. And Larry kind of said it too, Larry, was when we go and we vote on something that we're gonna be funding, and Blake, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't mind being corrected. Water tower out there, I think we did a bond for, was it 1.1?
Water tank, yes.
Water tank?
Yes.
1.1 million, and I think on the corporate hangar, we did a bond for 1.2 million.
Yes.
So those bonds are done, and I've always felt like that, when we're gonna go do a bond, instead of putting it out there and we talk about it, and we vote about it that afternoon, that there's some, I guess, kind of some that was mentioned, that we have some time between that, to the citizens have that opportunity, because those are direct projects that the citizens are gonna fund one way or another if the project doesn't make the money that it needs to make. It may be that the IBA does it, but if the IBA doesn't, we're the co-signers. The citizens are the co-signers. So there are projects out here, those two things, with the bonds. So those, something like that would make sense, where the citizens would have the opportunity, instead of just finding out, hey, that's out there, they have the opportunity to see, hey, they've talked about it, they're gonna be voting on it in 4 weeks.
Right, and that was,
Something like that.
that was the suggestion I made a couple months ago in the email.
Good suggestion.
Where, you know, from the time that the airport authority says, yes, we're gonna issue a bond for X amount of dollars, and then the board of commissioners has to vote on it, it has to have, you know, I threw out 30 days, whatever it was.
Right.
I think it was 30 days for general public to either contact you all on the board of commissioners or show up to the meetings.
At least here it's gone on. If they don't show up, that's their issue, but at least
Right.
But less than likely, people think it's being kind of railroaded, there's not enough time to look at it. So I think that's just more information to be absorbed by folks.
So that would be specific to bond issuing
Right,
as opposed to project management.
and Blake, would that prohibit the airport's authority from proceeding forward on any issues? I mean, for instance, like if it was a construction bond, I mean, obviously a 30-day time period, I don't see it being an issue. I mean, do you, from your perspective, do you see that being an issue at all?
No, we actually have 30 days, because it has to be advertised in the local paper for 30 days before we can even move the bond forward. So it is advertised in the local paper. Now, how many people read the Dallas New Era? I have absolutely no idea.
Probably.
So maybe that's the issue, is just that where it's being put out is not being put out in a location where most people are going to see it and know what's going on.
Right, so then maybe we need to make it as a recommendation of the steering committee that it needs to be posted on the county website, the airport's authority website, and then in addition
Well,
to,
it's
it
in
needs
the-
to be
the legal-
noticed in the Board of Commissioners. as well.
Oregon and the county, I mean, you can't get any more legal than that, right?
Well, I mean, that's legal, but
Mhm.
once again, it goes back to what's the actual viewership of
Well, the bottom line is this, it is the legal organ, but you're putting a blip it in the paper. And unless somebody wants to spend every Wednesday looking at that paper to look for something that's out there, if the Board of Commissioners, we have it in the paper, we have it at a meeting. When you have it at a meeting, typically what happens at 10 o'clock is it's discussed and at 2 or 7 is voted on, it's done. Then your reporters pick it up, whether it's the Paulding.com or whether it's the Paulding Neighbor or whatever, and then the citizens find it out in the paper. To where if they pick it up in a work session that you've discussed this, and in 30 days you're gonna vote on it, that's a different issue. At least it gives people a fair opportunity to be able to know what's going on. But to have somebody say, well, the only way you can find out is to 52 times a year looking at that paper on Wednesday, that's a little.
I think we're just talking about more open information
Right.
sharing, that's all we're talking
Yeah,
about.
so I think we're good.
And it's not legally obligated, but it's a
That's on bond issues
recommendation.
or all projects.
Just on the bond issues is what you would be talking about, because just like Terry brought up, that on an issue that's coming up from the FAA, when you got a 5-year project plan, that's a different story.
Once again, we're just talking broad concepts now, we can
Right,
get
we're
a
not-
little bit deeper. But the other thing was, I think, going back to the enabling of bond authority versus no bond authority. As far as, one of our charters would be to talk about the authority of the Paulding County Airport Authority to issue bonds. What recommendations, if you have anything? Because when you look at the local legislation, there's a lot of stuff in here, but it really boils down to who's on the board, who's appointed, what type of skill set they have, and whether the authority can issue bonds. Is there anything else? And those are the two biggies that I think. We talked also about whether or not to even have an authority or have an airport
Yeah.
department, which
I think that ought to be discussed.
we'll put that on, like I said, yeah, go ahead and put that on there, but with that, I think that kind of wraps up the enabling legislation, because that's the other option, is just get rid of legislation, and you have a department. We've had some discussions about it, but I think that's one of our charges, is to come up with a consensus on what we want to do on that, so. Next is, we talked about information sharing, as a citizens advisory committee, we all talk to folks in the community. A lot of times it's just, people are upset because they feel like they didn't know about it. So the more opportunities you can share it, the less likely they can say, well, I didn't know about it, because it's in all these different means of media. So, what else do we have?
Last one I got is the airport authority or airport department.
Does there anybody on the committee think that the members of the IBA and the airport authority need to be the same? So can we just vote on that right now?
We did that at the last meeting. That was the consensus.
That was the opinion, but we didn't vote on it.
We didn't vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think let's bring it to a formal vote, that, let's just get that closed here now, that we,
with the understanding that we haven't really set out the pure guidelines as to who would make up the members, but
It's
at least.
just that they can't be on either one of the two. You can't be a member of both, one of the two. You be a member of one or the other.
Or let's put it this way, let's put it this way, we should vote on, do we approve the current makeup as it's dictated by the 1972 charter, and should it be adjusted? yes or no, I think that's, and from that
Still
standpoint.
have advisory committees to talk about.
So let's just make a motion that it's that everybody.
Well, I make a motion that we make a recommendation that they amend the literature in the General Assembly of 72, where it said that the IBA members would constitute the Airport Authority members.
We recommend that.
And our recommendation is to get that changed to say that if you're on, you can't interact on both boards, only one.
I think that might be a little strong. I think what I would support is that you're not automatically on the Airport Authority by virtue of the fact that you're on the IBA. That's the current legislation. If you had someone that was otherwise qualified to be on both boards, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's the automatic placement of the IBA in its entirety into the Paulding County Airport Authority that I'm personally opposed to.
Right, and from my standpoint, I wouldn't be opposed if we had discussed that one member of the IBA was part of the airport's authority, but they couldn't maintain the same position on both boards, so they couldn't be the president or the secretary or so on and so forth. But I think we need to go into further discussions on that, but I wouldn't say that it should fully exclude the IBA.
So I would amend your current motion to say that, are we all in agreement that by virtue of the fact that you're on the IBA, you're automatically placed on the Paulding County Airport Authority? That, I think, should be stricken. And then how we determine membership or recommend membership is determined would be a more complicated discussion.
I second that.
Well, can I say something? Because you don't have all the members, you've got the members of the IBA on the Airport Authority, but I mean, am I misunderstanding you? Or am I hearing you clear that basically Larry's talking about different positions, that somebody could hold this seat in one and another seat in another? I don't know.
The
that
current
you're-
legislation says that the IBA plus 3 at-large members
Right.
constitutes the Paulding County Airport Authority. That's what I would recommend we
Just
change.
get rid of it.
Yeah.
I think.
And then the
that's-
details of how membership is made up is a more complicated
Right.
discussion.
If somebody
That
were
would
to
be-
recommend that one member of the IBA would be on that board, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it. What I would be opposed to is if they maintain that same position from the IBA onto the airport.
The president of the IBA is automatically the president of the
Exactly.
Airport Authority. Yeah.
Do we agree that the airport and the IBA ought to be separated?
I think the current 1972 charter language needs to strike the requirement that the IBA members
So
automatically.
the specific motion would be that membership in IBA does not automatically constitute membership into the Airport Authority. That would be the motion.
Do I second that?
I second.
All in favor?
And it's important that John captures that.
You can always go back and get it on video.
That's right.
Not automatically,
It's not automatically placed on the Paulding County Airport Authority. And then we need a longer discussion about how would we recommend membership be made up.
now, do we agree that they ought to be separated, or is that the same separation?
That's the same thing.
Okay.
And remember, right now, we're just trying to get this charter, which is recommend changes to the local
Yeah, we took a
legislation.
detour there.
We're not gonna do all that now, but we took a little bit of a chunk.
We got one done. One done out of 11 pages.
We got
not
one
bad
A.
for 3 months. It's almost be on a government contract.
Would it be possible that each and every committee member go through the charter, the original charter, paragraph by paragraph, and we can all, this is informal, all bring our suggested changes to the next meeting?
You mean the 72 legislation?
Yes, the 72
That's-
legislation.
I
Yeah.
think that's a good idea. I think we ought to get these boards up there and put each paragraph up there
Exactly.
and have a brainstorm meeting on every one
I
of
do
the
too.
paragraphs.
So I'd like to have that, if we could have everybody send that in, by next week, so that John and I can put it together, so we can present it up here as opposed to trying to do it when we get here.
And then we could
Yeah,
add
try to
new
save a lot of
paragraphs,
time.
like, for instance, the term limit. Any other things that we.
Yeah, because there could be provisions there that there's really no comments to, so we can focus on the ones so.
Right, that seems to be the best interest.
What do you think about,
So by next Thursday, if everybody can read through that, send us any comments, mark it up, or however you want to communicate what suggested changes you are, because we gotta get to business and start doing this
That
now.
was,
I would recommend that you have each person on the committee submit their own recommendations, like you said,
Yeah.
and actually stand up and explain what their plan is and follow the rationale if we have time to do that.
Yeah.
Where you could actually explain it.
Well, if you guys send it to us, in however format, then we can talk about how we're gonna deliver
And
it.
we'll pass it around.
Okay.
I'm just talking about from the public.
Yeah. By next Thursday, so it gives us some time to collate, at least have a goal, I mean, if it trails in Friday or Monday, but we wanna have enough time to get it organized for the next meeting. So that's that.
And make sure I'm clear, that's for the 1972 ordinance. It starts with section 301 and goes to section 333. So if I got a,
The whole thing, and you may not have comments on the whole thing.
yeah, right, so if I got a comment on the section, I'll share it with you, and if I don't, I'll
Yeah,
skip.
we don't need to say it's okay.
Yeah. Got it.
That's by Thursday.
Next Thursday.
Yeah.
What about, we challenged each other for the Thursday after that to have recommendations on, abandoning the airport authority or making it, a public
Actually, bring it up
department.
on the table, yeah.
So we'll have that ready to go. Get
So
that.
we can exchange emails perhaps between now and our next meeting and be prepared to. Is that what you're
That's
suggesting?
suggesting that get on the agenda and we do our homework so we can get that done
Okay.
next time we meet.
So,
Have it for you, present it.
so it's either gonna be, the authority continues as modified with legislation, or it goes away and becomes a department.
Right.
Those are the two things that everybody needs to think about. Okay, good idea.
That will actually set the stage for the rest of it, so
Yes, that's lays the groundwork where we can start.
that eliminates a lot of stuff that we won't have to do if you go without an airport. I can say Mark.
This other one, recommend changes to the current operations that would better reflect and better result in outcomes more consistent with the wishes of the citizens of Fulton County. Once again, just to recap, that was something that Mr. Carmichael sent out. It's kind of obviously a broad topic, but I think that goes into more information sharing, more communication, more of these type meetings or something like that. Anybody else have anything else on that, and any other items? Trying to get the framework together, so we don't want to just keep meeting out all those guys, but, gotta wrap it up.
Maybe y'all should just
Ken, folks.
send that in too. If there's anything else you can think of, send it in, let y'all comprise it, have it down here for you.
That's what the citizen input gives folks an opportunity for that. We're gonna open up in a few minutes to get feedback from the folks that are here, that have listened, that have been coming to all these meetings, anything else as well. Even though we encourage, we prefer something in writing, to the extent you can synopsize what we've talked about, provide some constructive comments, and we don't need to file back all of the stuff that's already happened, but we're just trying to figure out what, stay within the scope of what we're here for, so.
That's a good point. Stay within the scope, but if you do have something that's important, we can always put it in as a caveat on it. Oh, by the way, it's at the end of the presentation, if it's really good important. I don't think that we need to spend a lot of time on it.
We could just say that we decided these are beyond the scope, if you want.
But these are ideas that
Right.
we thought were important that we discussed.
Anybody else have anything?
I did speak with Stephen Justice, the one that you recommended. He's
Oh, yeah.
with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. He said he would, and he's in the Center for Innovation for Aerospace, would be more than happy to come and talk to us about the possible economic impact. And I need to send him an email with our remaining meeting dates, and unfortunately, he's a busy guy and he's going to have to pick out the date.
So you'll send them the dates we have, and we'll just work around your schedule.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only other one I thought about was whether or not any other, Scott Green, as far as how does the transportation plan fit into the growth of this airport? Todd, anybody else in, the citizens and us can hear what other coordination is going on with the airport? Is there anybody that jumps out in your mind that would?
I would say also Jamie Gilbert on economic development.
I mean, I think you could do that, but I don't know if you're getting, too far out there. Or, what y'all work out with Calvin Thompson? You all had mentioned him. Is that set up or?
Have a scheduled conflict this week.
Okay.
I think we're just gonna meet with probably a few members and report back to the group.
Right now, I've spoken with him, he said any of us are welcome to come by anytime and speak with him, call him, I have all his contacts.
Okay. He's been the chairman since
Right.
the beginning, and him and Blake have the most information, I would think, Calvin
Right.
would be.
We're gonna meet with them, solicit input, and report back to the committee what we find
Yeah,
out.
yeah. I mean, y'all are the committee, you do what you want, but I think you get out there with Scott and everything. Scott can give you a wealth of knowledge, but
Might be too much in the
I think
weeds.
you're getting too far out there, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I've got a couple of heads involved, yeah.
Okay. Any other suggestions for speakers, remembering that October's kind of our deadline?
Think if any could email that too,
Yep.
moving right along.
With that, we kind of went over with the tour and all that, but Sue, I was gonna, since you're kind of here at every meeting, and talked to us before, I just wanted to open up to you and some other folks for like 10 minutes or so, just to give us any feedback, suggestions, comments on what we've covered today.
I do have a comment, but if anyone else would like to go first? Anybody have anything to say? Well, I urge you not to lose sight of your purpose. I agree, it seems like you're way beyond your scope. Whether this airport goes commercial or not, in my opinion, seems irrelevant. You're here to work on the Code of Ordinances for the Airport Authority board members. You're not to make decisions about the airport, economic development, or any of that. It's like stick to your purpose. And it just seems like you're going way beyond. So, just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
I do would like to say something. First of all, I want to thank every one of you for taking on this task. It's taken a lot of time out of your schedules, and everybody's busy. And I do have to agree with Sue. I think identifying, my understanding was, and maybe I'm misinformed, was that you were supposed to work on that legislation, not what was going to happen to this airport or what this legislation would do to affect what happens to this airport. So, I think we're like Sue and Todd, I feel like we're going a little too far out. Okay, thanks.
I'm a little bit different than both of them now. I would like for you to go and look at it and see if we even need an airport authority. And the reason I say that, as a citizen and as a taxpayer, I like to have an opportunity to vote for people that's spending my tax dollars. I don't have that opportunity here. I haven't had the opportunity to do anything or say anything really about how they done this, how they built the whole airport and everything. If Todd Parnell, who's not my commissioner, but if my commissioner did something at a commission meeting and spent $50 million, I've got an out for him. I can campaign against him, I can vote against him, and I can go to that commission meeting and I can tell him where he stands. This airport thing has got way out of control. It should be to the point there that they should be approving the money to be spent. They are the elected people of this county and the most powerful people in this county. They're the only ones that can tax us in this county. And my whole point is this: we should be very similar in the way we're running this airport as Cobb County is. Very similar to that. Cobb County they have an airport authority, but they don't have the authority to do things without the approval of the Board of Commissioners. And that's the way it should be. Y'all ain't even talked about that. A little bit around the edges you talked about it. But the people that we elect to spend our money is the ones that should be making decisions on how that money is spent here. That's just my opinion.
Hi, Mike. Just want to echo what Kathy said. Thank you guys for your time. And, you know, you guys are sitting in the exact same physical position that the airport authority has their meetings. And I've gone to 90% of them since last October. You guys have more dialogue and more discussion here than about 6 months worth of airport authority meetings combined. When they bring up an issue, they ask, Calvin Thompson asks for questions, it's like they're all mummified. There's no discussion. I never seen them ask Blake Swafford questions about cost overruns. There's been many, many projects that have been, the hangar doors don't fit. Any questions? Nothing. So I agree with Mr. KB, just get rid of the airport authority because they're not doing anything right now. Thank you.
I do thank y'all for your time, by the way.
I just want to say thank you too. I mean, I know it's a big undertaking. I'm in support of the airport. I think we need to go after the dollars. I understand what they're saying. I agree with them from accountability of tax dollars coming out of the county, but we can't miss the opportunity to miss FAA money. If we get monies and we can build this airport, it's already there. We need to take advantage of that. We need to build this airport and bring jobs in this county. And I think that's a responsibility that we need to do, and we need to see that. We need to use that money, because if that money doesn't come here, it's just going to go someplace else. So I'd appreciate it. Appreciate y'all's work.
Just a general question. I heard the word accountability a lot from the citizens. What is your definition of accountability? What do you want to see as far as accountability?
I would mind.
There's a discussion.
I wouldn't mind if we're gonna have an airport authority, I would like the opportunity to vote for them.
I wouldn't be opposed to that either. I mean, I think from accountability, a thing that everybody keeps coming across is being able to, just like talking about stuff not just being brought and then the same day being voted on. There needs to be a period of time where people need to speak, and I agree. I think we all wholeheartedly, all sides agree with that and accountability, being able to know what's going on, being able to speak to what's going on, and if you disagree, being able to verbalize that to whoever the authority is, whether it's the airport authority, whether that's the commissioners, or wherever. We need to be able to speak to that from both sides.
Okay, last one.
The accountability. I think that there should be a threshold with dollars where, even the Board of Commissioners have discretionary funds. But at some point, there needs to be a referendum when we're talking about millions and millions of dollars that are going to fall on the back of the taxpayers. And that needs to be addressed, I believe, in any changes made to this legislation or this authority, the written authority. That at some point there needs to be a threshold where it becomes a referendum instead of just a decision by an airport authority.
And just to wrap up,
Can I ask a question? Since y'all come to these meetings, every meeting we've had, can you help me understand, are you opposed to the fact that we have an airport, or are you specifically opposed to the notion that we would have commercial traffic landing at the airport?
I'd like to speak to that.
Thanks for your time. I'm opposed to the fact that the citizens, we're changing the footprint of our county, and the citizens didn't have a say-so in it. And we're talking about jobs, and we're talking about economic development. I think everybody, you have to be a moron not to want this county to be successful. But there's no, where's the concrete evidence, or where is the budget process? How do we know when it's a healthy airport? What do we know what a healthy airport looks like? I hear that the general aviation airport didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? Because there wasn't travel. Nobody was traveling. They couldn't get business here. So now we're going to build a commercial airport. How are we getting the business in? How many jobs is it going to create? If Allegiant Airline comes in, are we going to get 5 jobs, 10 jobs, 20 jobs? An MRO hangar, we're going to get 18, 30 jobs out of that? How do we know how many jobs we're going to get out of this and how much money's coming to us? I think
So my
that's...
question is, are you opposed to the fact that we have an airport? Would you prefer to see the airport closed and go away? Or are
For
you
me-
opposed to the way it's currently being managed?
For me, personally, I'm not opposed that there's an airport here. Now, there's probably some people that are opposed that there's an airport here. For me personally, how about some leadership that tells us this is what a good airport looks like, here's how we're going to spend our money, here's how the money's going to come in. We don't have that right now. What we have is 1,500 to 3,000 jobs. We're going to have this airport that's going to be this great commercial success, but we're only going to fly 3 flights a week out of it. Now, how does that work?
Because the 3 flights were based off of commercial flights, the remaining amount of jobs were based off of manufacturing and MRO.
So there's going to be, so if there's 3 flights a week, Allegiant Airlines will have 10 employees here, 20, 30, let's say 100.
Let's go with 10.
Let's say 100. So the MROs are now going to create 1,400 jobs?
Yes.
Come
Which
on.
is actually what they actually see when you look at.
That's
Stan
my point.
And when you look at Macon, and when
That's
you look
my
at other,
point.
when you look at other airports. Those airports that actually have already have mixed-use facilities, they actually have those jobs already set in place. So that's what our government officials have based their projections on.
So why is there not, if that's good information, that's coming from you. Why is that not coming from the leadership of the county in some sort of town hall and saying, guess what, citizens, here it is. It's set up exactly like you said, Larry. It's set up, set us down, tell us that, and you know what? People get more informed. You get more informed and you make a good decision on it, and you go, what? It's a good thing for the county. And if everybody votes for it and I'm against it, guess what? I lose. I built my house in the wrong spot. I got to kick rocks. That's fine. But that's the frustration. Not that there's an airport here. Not that we're trying to do something with a $25, $50 million asset. It's just, well, the $25 to $50 million asset didn't work, so let's think bigger. Instead of, well, what the hell did we do wrong to not make it work?
Okay, guys, it's 7:30 right now. We've got plenty of opportunities to provide written input. This is really good. Folks stay afterwards, we can talk afterwards, but kind of got to wrap it up to respect everybody's time. Just to kind of close things up, we've kind of gone far and wide because the idea is that's hopefully going to help us to actually do the enabling legislation to figure out what comes in and what goes out. So at least that's the way I've been thinking it through. And number 2 is, there is indirect accountability because, as we saw in the last election, I think all the pro-airport commissioners got voted out. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes.
So if you don't like who's on the airport authority, vote out the people that are running it. But I see the point where there's frustration. There needs to be more direct accountability. And number 2, there needs to be better communication of what the overall objective is for this airport. That seems to be, it's kind of just making it up as we go along. But like I said, frustration and poor communication, so those are some different themes that we can work on. But with that, I was going to open it up to any final comments from the committee and then adjourn it so we can move on. Anything else? Everybody, we'll send out something that kind of wraps up what needs to be done. But did anybody want a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you.
Let me ask you.